horror of Alien exists beyond the xenomorph. It's the claustrophobia of the Nostromo and the vastness of space that gets under your skin. It is the slow-moving tension that builds and the quiet. It's what you don't see as each crew member is killed. The xenomorph and the chestburster are well known by now, but even with their image burned in our brain, the first look at the xenomorph remains haunting. This is thanks to the atmosphere and tension provided by writer Dan O'Bannon, director Ridley Scott, and the artwork of H.R. Geiger. The work of the cast and crew come together to lay bare real-life fears with a sci-fi twist. Hello and welcome to the Quiet Riot, where we discuss film, television, and media. If you are new here, I'm Ainsley, and today I'm so excited to talk to you about one of my favorite films of all time and my personal favorite sci-fi horror film, Alien. Alien is a movie that doesn't really need much of an introduction. It's quite innovative in the world of film, particularly within science fiction and horror. I've wanted to talk about this for quite a while, and with this new series coming out, Alien Earth, I found that this would be the perfect time. I initially started doing research before Romulus came out, and I didn't get around to publishing it to filming it and then publishing it then, so I decided that I was going to wait a little bit longer, and of course my script disappeared that I was working on, so I had to go through and do all of that again. But today I did want to talk a little bit about the history of the making of Alien and the reception to Alien, and as well as the reasons why I personally love it, and I believe that it is truly an iconic film and one that we will talk about for many, many days to come. After waking to a distress call, a crew of 6 investigate a derelict ship. Soon find themselves haunted by an alien life form. Alien is a slow burn horror film that builds tension seamlessly. From the iconic chest burster to the first time we see the xenomorph, Alien doesn't let us relax. The intimacy of Alien and the camaraderie we witness intensifies an already intense situation. The Nostromo is not a small ship. The direction by Scott and the set design and the tension built by circumstances make the ship appear claustrophobic. The vastness of space plays a huge role as we look out and realize there is no one there to hear you scream. One of the things that stands out about Alien from the get-go is the atmosphere and the fact that the overall tone is set within the mere minutes of it being on. And that can be such a difficult thing for writers to do, directors, and everyone involved in the filming. But when you come right down to it, the initial setting of the tone when everyone is waking up and you have a distress signal, there is a sense of not particularly knowing what's going on. And I wasn't around when this movie came out, so I can't tell you how people reacted to any of the trailers or any of the promotional material, but what I can tell you, anytime I go into this film, there is a sense of horror that exists beyond the xenomorph and that exists beyond any type of extraterrestrial being and any type of unknown entity. And that is what we already know to exist, and that's the vastness of space, and that is the fact that at any given moment something can happen that changes our life forever. While the film itself is a slow burn, we really get into things pretty quickly in terms of understanding where these characters are at and the situation at hand beyond them just being in space. There are particular moments with these characters that get us to know who they are as people, as well as their roles within Nostromo, and that is something that makes this stand out as not only a science fiction horror film, but a film in general, a drama, a character-driven piece, an ensemble, and that is an aspect of this movie that I believe stands out and stands the test of time. Screenwriter Dan O'Bannon said, "I knew I wanted to do a scary movie on a spaceship with a small number of astronauts." Prior to writing Alien, Dan O'Bannon had worked on a short film, a student film with John Carpenter, and this was an Alien film that was more comedic, and it ended up being more than a student film because it was quite a bit longer than a student student film is supposed to be, and this really inspired Dan O'Bannon to go on and make Alien. Writer Ronald Shusett ended up contacting O'Bannon because he wanted to collaborate with him. They worked on what would become the opening sequence of Alien. The original title of the script was Memory. The script was put on hold when O'Bannon went to Paris to work on Dune. While in Paris, he was introduced to several artists, including H.R. Giger, Chris Foss, and Jean Giraud. In the book of Alien, O'Bannon is quoted as saying of H.R. Giger, "His paintings had a profound effect on me. I had never seen anything that was quite as horrible and at the same time as beautiful as his work. And so I ended up writing a script about a Geiger monster." As someone who has a tendency to not only love horror, but also be quite interested in mythology and cryptozoology and just anything that's a bit weird and off, I can completely understand why O'Bannon would be taken in with H.R. Giger's work. His work is incredibly interesting, and yes, it is horrific and kind of maybe gross depending on how you look at it, but it's also incredibly beautiful. It's very mechanical, but it's also very sensual, and it's sexual because it is quite phallic, and it is these elements that was brought in to the film Alien that also makes the horror of this quite invasive, and it goes into the bodily autonomy that we as people can lose in so many different situations. And I know there's been discussion before with O'Bannon about wanting to put men in situations that women are constantly in, the specific fears that women experience. Casting two characters that are women, still, it doesn't take away from what O'Bannon originally wanted. In any case, I think it adds something a little special. When the production of Dune was shut down, O'Bannon returned to LA and he was homeless. He ended up sleeping on Shusett's couch and they began working on the script again. They changed the title to Star Beast before changing it to Alien. Shusett came up with the idea that one of the crew members is implanted with an embryo that would burst out of him. He thought that would be a great plot device to get the alien on board. Plot devices are necessary for a film. They are a part of the script, and there can be instances, particularly the horror and science fiction genres, fantasy, where the plot devices that they use seem to come out of nowhere, or they're not used very well. And in terms of Alien, it is used incredibly well, because I don't find the decision that the character made to truly be a bad decision, because he kind of does something stupid, but it's more so out of a scientific curiosity as opposed to just someone being a complete idiot, which is what I think the more recent sequels outside of Romulus really went into, is people just making bad decisions because a horrific thing had to happen. And the decision that Shusett made to get the alien on board not only gets the alien on board, but also adds a sense of discomfort that is needed in this film. Producers Giller and Hill revised and made additions to the script. They added the Ash subplot. This was a subplot that wasn't particularly wanted by either O'Bannon or Shusett. They didn't like it, and eventually Shusett would certainly come around, and the Ash subplot is one of the things that a scarier aspect to the film that goes beyond the alien. Ridley Scott was brought onto the film after they saw his movie The Duelist. The Duelist was his first feature-length film, and he ended up coming onto the project making detailed storyboards. After they saw the storyboards, the studio decided to double the film's budget. The creatures in Alien's environment were designed by H.R. Giger, with Ron Cobb and Chris Foss designing the other sets. Alien explores the vastness of space and innate human fear. As the facehugger wraps itself around Hurt's face, we are reminded of the anxieties around our bodies. The characters in Alien are terrified of an unknown but viable threat. The film explores gender roles and anxieties surrounding reproductive health, tech fears, corporate greed, and exploitation, as well as primal fears, and the film also contains psychosexual symbolism. The Nostromo is a 3-story ship, and Scott actually wanted to create a set that was 3 stories tall, but they were not able to do this because of the height, so the different levels were kept separate. And the set was designed to incorporate blind corners and low ceilings to add to the closed-in feeling. The hallway sets were closed off so they could do panning shots. Certain areas of the ship, like the infirmary, were made to look brighter and more clinical to give them that corporate feel. Scurrit, Sigourney Weaver, Veronica Cartwright, Harry Dean Stanton, John Hurt, Ian Holm, and Yaphet Kotto. The slow burn allows for a natural levity provided by Stanton and Kotto, who portray engineers Brett and Parker. They're one of my favorite parts of this movie, and we really know their mindset at the beginning of this film when they're all sitting around and talking, and he wants to know when they're getting paid. Communication is key. But of course, they still have a project to do, something to get done. And that is something that I appreciate even more so watching it well into my adult years, because the movie from the beginning really touches upon the things that working class individuals and workers in general have to go to when they're working for a big corporate entity, or really when they're working for anyone, but especially in this case, a corporate entity. Alien was produced by 20th Century Fox and Brandywine Productions and distributed by Fox. Alien was made on a budget of $8.4 million to $14 million and brought in $188 million. Alien was moderately well received upon its release and has since been lauded as one of the best science fiction horror films ever made. I definitely agree with that sentiment. The practical effects and set design ground the film, as do the characters themselves. While the film is a science fiction film set in space aboard a ship, the bones of the story make the subject matter relatable to an everyday audience. We recognize the fear and paranoia, and we can relate to the character's circumstances, even if it is out of this world. Literally. Roger Ebert wrote the film in Chicago Times in October 2003. None of them were particularly young. Tom Skerritt, the captain, was 46, Hurt was 39, but looked older. Holm was 48, Harry Dean Stanton was 53, Yaphet Kotto was 42, and only Veronica Cartwright at 30 and Weaver at 28 were in an age range of the usual thriller cast. Many recent action pictures have improbably young actors cast as the key roles or sidekicks, but by skewing older, Alien achieves a certain texture without even making a point of it. These are not adventurers, but workers, hired by a company to return 20 million tons to Earth, of ore to Earth. It's interesting when you watch a thriller to see older people in these roles. And like they said, we have characters that are in their late 30s and, up into their 50s. And it's, I don't know, it adds a little something that especially, I think I probably still take for granted to a certain extent, but I definitely appreciate being able to see older people really taking on these roles as workers who are fighting this unknown. David McGinty, author of Beautiful Monsters, the unofficial and unauthorized guide to the Alien and Predator films, asserts that part of the film's effectiveness in frightening viewers comes from the fact that the audience can all identify with the characters. Everyone aboard the Nostromo is normal. Everyday working Joe, just like the rest of us. They just happen to live and work in the future. And that comes down to, well, for many reasons. This is something that has been talked a lot about on social media, and that is the fact that a lot of people are beginning to look the same thanks to plastic surgery, and a lot of these young actors are going to the same plastic surgeon, and so you're not getting as much diversity in overall appearance. Of course, there is in some ways still lack of diversity within just race and color, but there's also this lack of diversity and just the the physical appearance, the shape that someone's face is. And this is not occurring with every actor and every young actor, but this is certainly an issue that I think we're having today, and it's starting to ruin the way that we watch films, especially within horror and sci-fi, because I need some expressive faces. But that doesn't mean that's happening within every film. I just know that's a big topic of conversation that's going on, and that can really, especially for a working class audience, a middle America, Southern audience, really anyone outside of a certain sphere, finds those characters to not be quite as relatable, or maybe there's something to look to, you want to be that person, as opposed to, oh, I relate to who they are at this point. The aliens, along with their habitat, was designed by H.R. Geiger, whose style is reminiscent of human mixed with machine. Along with the biomechanical nature of his art, Geiger's work is also phallic. This adds to the psychosexual nature of the film. The ship's design was left to Ron Cobb and Chris Foss. The ship looks clean, corporate, and claustrophobic. The commissary is stark white with high ceilings. As you move through the ship, though, things become darker, more cramped and industrial. This merges with the look of the xenomorph. It still looks like a workspace, but not as clinical as the commissary. While searching the planet, Kane comes upon several eggs, and as he looks down at them, a face hugger leaps at him and attaches itself to his helmet. His helmet is melted through, and Kane is unconscious. He is brought back on board in spite of the protest by Ripley, who is overruled by Ash. The crew is brought on board and he is taken to the medical station where Ash takes a look at him. As we had previously stated, it was Shusette that came up with the idea that would get the alien from the planet onto the ship. The invasive nature of the creature plays into the various fears that many may have. After Kane wakes up, he appears fine, but it doesn't take long before the chest burster does just that. In a moment that shocked both audiences as well as some of the cast and crew, the phallic-y snake-like creature comes out of Kane, killing him. It disappears and the crew is left reeling. Even to this day, this is one of the best scenes in the movie. I have watched this film several times, and yet the chest burster coming out still gets me, because it is so well done. Everything is very white. They're wearing, white clothing. The environment that they're in is very white, clinical. And all of a sudden, this weird thing just pops out of his chest. And the way that Hurt is acting in this moment, you can tell there's this immense discomfort that he's feeling. And then all of a sudden, he's dead. And it all began with him feeling, or at least appearing to feel, fine. They send Kane's body into space, and the crew splits up in order to look for the alien. The once clinical-looking ship turns into smaller spaces that appear even smaller because of the height of some of the cast. Yaphet Kotto, who was 6'5", had to bend down during those scenes. Everything looks mechanical as chains dangle from the ceilings. The cat Jonesy gets away, and Brett goes to look for him when he is cornered and killed off screen by the fully grown alien. Much like Jaws, this movie doesn't show us too much of the xenomorph before the end, and this certainly adds to the suspense because we do see that he is quite large at this point. He's towering many of these characters, most of whom are not short at all. And so it adds to this, it certainly adds to the scary nature of it when you have already tall people having this massive creature above them. And I'm glad that they didn't show that much, because as cool as the xenomorph is to look at, the existence of the xenomorph in this film and how they reveal things slightly definitely adds to the suspense. The xenomorph is a menacing figure. He's large and looming over the crew as they search for him. Finding out that he has taken to the air ducts, Dallas, with his flamethrower, goes searching for the alien and is unfortunately killed in the process. Ripley, now in charge, wants them to flush the alien out. Lambert is scared, wanting to take a shuttle, but there is only 3 spots. Cartwright wasn't particularly fond of her character Lambert because she felt she was too whiny, and I can completely understand her reasoning for feeling this way, but I do completely understand where her character is coming from. Lambert is on a ship in space, freaking out because something is happening that just in itself doesn't really make sense to anyone, and they're trying to figure everything out. But I can also understand the fact that when you have this other woman there who gets to truly just fight and seem a lot more capable, that in turn for Veronica Cartwright, it can kind of make you not be too fond of your character. But I do understand where the character of Lambert is coming from in her fear and her emotions. While searching Mother, Ripley discovers that Ash was given a secret order. He was to bring the alien back. The distress signal was not that at all. Instead, it was a warning not to come. Ash attempts to kill Ripley. Parker knocks his head off, and Ripley reboots him, and he tells them his directive, taunting them about their imminent death and his admiration for the alien. Not part of the original script, neither writers were too fond of this idea, but they eventually came around. While the alien is an unknown being capable of things they can only imagine, the corporation they work for is capable of just as much. The alien isn't their only enemy. Throughout the film, we hear Parker and Brett complain about pay, almost refusing to continue on their mission. Power dynamics are tested as Ash overrides Ripley, bringing the alien on board in spite of her protests. Companies don't care for their employees, a message that rings through the entire film. While Brett and Lambert are preparing to leave, they are cornered and killed by the xenomorph. Ripley is the only one left besides Jonesy, and after fighting the xenomorph, she is able to get him out of the ship and into space before ejecting herself and Jonesy out of the ship. One of my favorite scenes in this is the one where Ripley is trying to get everything together, and then you just see the xenomorph come out, and he blends so well within the ship, and this goes to H.R. Geiger's design. He is very mechanical, and everything from the way that the xenomorph is and design specifically, and then you come down to the color and how he's almost like, is it a monochromatic look to him, very reflective. It's just like, it adds to the intensity for sure. The xenomorph's long phallic head and skinny but muscular body helps him move throughout the ship undetected. His black shiny skin helps him blend in. He lurks through the ship, watching and waiting. In these moments, the mechanical appearance of the xenomorph stands out even more as he blends into the ship around him. Even with its large size, it is able to move through the ship unseen. 9 films and 45 years later, Alien still manages to frighten viewers. The contrasting nature of its sets, the phallic symbols and invasive symbolism, the claustrophobia, corporations, and fear of the unknown. Alien brings together real-life fears with a science fiction twist. Even in space, the corporate machine remains one of our greatest enemies as innovation holds precedence over the lies of Nostromo. In space, there is no one to hear you scream, and they're counting on it. I'm really interested in your thoughts on the film Alien. Is Alien your favorite of the franchise? What is your favorite of the franchise? I would have to say that the original film is my favorite. I do like Aliens. I think it's a really good film, but I'm more into science fiction horror as opposed to a science fiction action film. So Alien is the one that does it for me. And I really did like Alien Romulus. I think that actually might be my second, with Aliens coming into a close third. But I haven't watched the other ones as much, so it's hard for me to really pass any decent judgment on it that's coming from a place other than they're not alien. They're not alien. But I definitely need to go back through and watch. Some of the franchise. I definitely want to check out Alien Earth. I've seen the teasers, and I think I did end up watching one trailer because it was on YouTube and it was before something that I was gonna watch. I try to avoid trailers as much as possible, but that doesn't always happen. It's not always easy to do, and it does look really interesting. So, are you looking forward to that? Is there something else you would like to see out of the Alien franchise soon? Let me know. I believe they're making a film that is a direct sequel to Romulus, which I'm kind of excited about. I do tend to get overwhelmed with franchises because there's always like so much that's happening, but I did like it. One of the last films that I saw was James Gunn's Superman, which I'm absolutely in love with that film. Made it my entire personality at the moment. So what's like the most recent film that you've seen or films you've seen? What are your thoughts? I'd love to know. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to watch and or listen to me talk about Alien. I'm really glad that I finally sat down to record this, and let me know if you want me to talk about any other film within the franchise or if there's any other movie you would like me to discuss. I do have quite a bit coming. I've been working on different scripts, and while I've got some individual movies that I want to talk about as well, I do have some lists coming out as well and continuing of my film noir series. But if there's any specific aspect of film noir that you want me to discuss, any type of list, any type of specific recommendations for film, please let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, subscribe and ring that bell to be notified every single time I post. Have a wonderful day. Bye.